Battle over ballots. The Trump campaign continues to pursue legal challenges in several swing states. Called to Congress. A Catholic lawmaker tells us how his faith impacts his work on Capitol Hill. Eye on eternity. The Holy Father has advice on how to make the best everyday decisions. And fighting back. The head of a diocese in Nebraska tells us how he overcame depression and anxiety. On EWTN News Nightly for Monday, November 23rd, 2020. Good evening and thank you for joining us tonight. I'm Mark Irons. The presidential election moves closer to completion today. 2 more swing states plan to certify their results in favor of presumptive President-elect Joe Biden. The former vice president is also announcing key members of his national security team as President Donald Trump battles the election results in court. As Michigan and Pennsylvania look to certify their election results, the president's path to re-election looks less likely.
The voters have spoken. I mean, here in Michigan, it was a 154,000 vote margin by President-elect Biden. No one has come up with any evidence of fraud or abuse.
The Trump campaign says it is appealing its case in Pennsylvania, where a federal judge earlier dismissed cases of fraud. The campaign also insists Georgia rely on signature matching instead of just recounting ballots.
We continue to investigate every specific thing, but we can't investigate a generalized, we don't think this went well because our guy lost.
The Trump campaign did cut ties with attorney Sidney Powell after she alleged foreign interference in the presidential election.
It's time for them to stop the nonsense. It just gets more bizarre every single day, and frankly, I'm embarrassed that more people in the party aren't speaking up.
Presumptive President-elect Joe Biden just announced key members of his national security team, including Antony Blinken as Secretary of State and Alejandro Mayorkas as Homeland Security Secretary.
National security matters, and the president-elect is entitled to these national security briefings.
Professor John Kenneth White from the Catholic University of America says President Trump needs to concede so Joe Biden can access official government briefings on critical issues like the coronavirus pandemic.
It's putting American lives at risk. So I totally agree with New Jersey Governor Chris Christie that this has become a farce, that this needs to stop, and that the transition needs to proceed accordingly.
Democratic Senate candidates Reverend Raphael Warnock and John Ossoff were rallying voters in Georgia this weekend, where the COVID-19 pandemic remains a key campaign issue.
Reverend Warnock and I are holding outdoor events with urged social distancing and strong mask requirements. And as a matter of public health, Senators Perdue and Loeffler need to follow suit.
Republican Senator Kelly Loeffler's campaign says per CDC guidelines, she is isolating after testing positive for COVID-19 Friday. She has since tested negative. Senator Loeffler and fellow GOP Senator David Perdue campaigned last week with Vice President Mike Pence. And Democratic Senate Leader Chuck Schumer is calling for the Senate to pass the Protect Our Heroes Act to authorize $10 billion for personal protective equipment, or PPE.
We need an expansive plan that helps docs, nurses, hospital workers, providers get the gear they need before the second wave.
Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell has repeatedly urged Democrats to accept the targeted COVID relief proposal supported by Republicans rather than the expansive plan pushed by Senator Schumer. Leader McConnell says the Senate needs to pass urgent and targeted measures as soon as possible. Researchers in Britain announce another successful vaccine trial.
This vaccine, this homegrown vaccine, is easier to administer as well than the Pfizer vaccine because it doesn't need to be stored at minus 70.
The Oxford University and AstraZeneca vaccine can be stored in a normal refrigerator so it can be transported around the world. It's also less expensive than the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines. In Hungary, doctors are testing the Russian coronavirus vaccine. Hungary's foreign minister says 10 doses of the so-called Sputnik V vaccine will be tested for safety and effectiveness. Hungary is the first country to get the Russian vaccine. Israeli media are reporting that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu met with the Saudi Crown Prince last night, but all sides are denying it.
בחוץ לארץ, בסעודיה, זו הבשורה ששמענו.
Netanyahu is not saying one way or the other if he flew to Saudi Arabia. The UAE, Bahrain, and Sudan have signed the so-called Abraham Accords with Israel, but diplomatic recognition by Saudi Arabia would be a historic agreement. Hong Kong democracy activist Joshua Wong and two others appeared in court this morning. They pleaded guilty to organizing a protest last year. The three were detained and, depending on the final charges, could get up to 5 years in prison. And Pope Francis is supporting demands for racial justice in the wake of the death of George Floyd in a new book. And he's blasting COVID-19 skeptics who spread conspiracy. It's called Let Us Dream. The Holy Father also criticizes the pulling down of historic statues during protests for racial equality. The book is due out December 1st. Pope Francis urges young economists and business leaders to involve the poor and disadvantaged in any post-coronavirus pandemic plans.
Ma io ti domando, il tuo cuore è come un quartiere chiuso?
In a video message on Saturday, the Holy Father says we must start creating a different economic narrative, one that is not so focused on profit. Pope Francis also says young people have the chance to bring change and hope for those most in need. Joining us now is EWTN News Rome correspondent Colm Flynn with more on the Pope's weekend events. What else were Pope Francis's post-pandemic ideas for a better future, Colm?
Good evening, Mark. Well, Pope Francis covered a lot this weekend between his Sunday Angelus message and this video he released as part of the virtual event, The Economy of Francesco. Now, in this video, he touched on this point he made in his recent encyclical Fratelli Tutti, where he warned that we as a people, as a human race, could come out of this global coronavirus pandemic better off or worse off than we went into it. Speaking with the young economists who were gathered, he again re-emphasized this saying. He said, once the present health crisis has passed, the worst reaction would be to fall even more deeply into feverish consumerism and new forms of selfish self-protection. Remember, we never emerge from a crisis unaffected. Either we end up better or worse. He went on to tell these young economists that it's time to shun economic models focused immediately on profit and to stop promoting policies which are unconcerned with human, social and environmental costs. He went further to say that the poor should be invited to participate in discussions around creating a different economic narrative, something he thinks is urgently needed. It is much more than social assistance or welfare, he said. We're speaking about a conversion and transformation of our priorities.
The Pope also celebrated Christ the King Mass yesterday. Tell us what was special about that Mass.
Well, Mark, what was special about that Mass, which was celebrated in St. Peter's Basilica, was that representatives from Panama, where World Youth Day was held in January 2019, presented the World Youth Day Cross to representatives from Portugal, who will host World Youth Day in August 2023. It's been postponed 1 year due to the coronavirus. Of course, World Youth Day takes place normally every 2 to 3 years, and it was started by St. John Paul II in 1985. Now, this blessing mark and passing of the cross is usually done on Palm Sunday, but Pope Francis decided to change this to Christ the King Feast Day so as to keep Christ at the centre. In his homily, Pope Francis said, "Let us not give up on great dreams. We are created to make God's dreams come true in this world." He told the young people gathered that in life they will face great choices, and if they choose hatred and evil, they will never be happy. But he said, if we choose God, we will grow daily in his love. And if we choose love for others, we will find true happiness.
And Colm, give us a preview. What else is on the Pope's agenda this week?
Busy week ahead, Mark, and next weekend, Pope Francis will create 13 new cardinals. That's on Saturday. They will all be in attendance, bar 2, who cannot travel due to the coronavirus restrictions. Archbishop Gregory from the United States will be present on the day, and then they will celebrate Mass together on Sunday as new cardinals for the first time. And of course, we will have all the coverage for that right here from Rome.
Colm Flynn, EWTN News Rome correspondent, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Mark.
Coming up, New developments in Tennessee's attempt to enact a pro-life law. "18 states say they support Tennessee's law banning abortion based on the child's race, sex, or a diagnosis of Down syndrome. The measure was temporarily blocked in July following a lawsuit by pro-abortion groups. The coalition of states asked the appeals court to allow the law to take effect while the case is being considered. Earlier today, a ruling in favor of the Archdiocese of New York and several Catholic school parents in a lawsuit filed to compel the New York City Department of Education to live up to its legal requirement to provide COVID-19 testing for its students as required by New York state law. And joining me now on Skype to talk more about the case and its implications is Michael Deegan, Superintendent of Schools for the Archdiocese of New York. Michael, welcome. This lawsuit was seeking immediate relief. Good to have you here. This lawsuit was seeking immediate relief. Bring us up to speed on the judge's ruling and what it means for students and access to COVID-19 testing.
Mark, thanks for having me, and thank you for asking this very, very important question. Literally within the last hour and a half, a judge in Richmond County, that is Staten Island, New York, rendered a decision that compels New York City to provide COVID testing to all Catholic school students. Up until now, the city had refused to provide the testing which we need to remain open. The Archdiocese has committed to keeping our schools open and safe, and the only way to do that in designated areas is to provide the testing. Our position was the city has an obligation to provide that testing, and now the judge has agreed with us, and now we need to move forward and to establish what those testing protocols will be, because the safest place for a child is in school, particularly a Catholic school in New York.
Well, some good news there. And as cases of COVID-19 rise there in New York City and schools within the Archdiocese remain open, let's talk more about the urgent need for this access to testing to protect students. And again, why was it so important to bring this suit?
Well, I think it was important because this is a religious liberty and religious freedom issue. Our children, whose parents pay taxes, are entitled to parental choice and allowing their children to go to a Catholic school, and should not be discriminated against by having the city withhold essential testing to ensure the health and safety of our children. It is immoral for the city to withhold this in the middle of a pandemic. So very good news that we received today, that we will be able to have our schools remain open. The testing is rigorous and it is very, very complicated, but we're committed to making sure that we comply with the state regulations and get the city to do the testing that is so critical for us to remain open.
Tell us, how many students are served by Catholic schools in the Archdiocese of New York, and what measures have already been put in place to protect their health throughout this pandemic?
So, Mark, we have approximately 65,000 children. Our school system goes from Staten Island, which is one of the 3 boroughs in the city, all the way up to almost Albany. So we have a very, very large number of schools, about 180 schools, 65,000 children. And back in the summertime, we established a Catholic school reopening plan, which was submitted to the state health department, approved by the health department, so that we opened all of our Catholic schools on time, in person, and up until now, we have maintained very, very rigorous procedures and protocols to ensure the health and safety of our students. In fact, the number of positive cases in our entire Catholic school system is 0.003, very, very small number. All of those cases, by the way, emanated from outside the school system, families going to parties and athletic events.
Well, Michael Deegan, Superintendent of Schools for the Archdiocese of New York, with some good news. Thank you for joining us here.
Thank you for having me, Mark.
Up next, Bishop James Conley from Lincoln, Nebraska, tells us about his return to work after battling depression and anxiety. And Pope Francis says we have a chance to please God every single day. We'll explain. Finally tonight, Pope Francis reminds the faithful to make choices with an eye toward eternity.
Saremo giudicati sull'amore.
At his Sunday address to pilgrims at the Vatican, the Holy Father urges us to choose not what we want to do, but what is best to do. In this way, we can give happiness to others and find joy ourselves, and we have the opportunity for these choices every single day. Bishop James Conley of the Diocese of Lincoln is sharing his personal story to encourage people facing mental health challenges to seek help. Bishop Conley recently resumed leadership of the diocese after a medical leave of absence to seek treatment for depression and anxiety. And Bishop James Conley of the Diocese of Lincoln joins me now on Skype. Your Excellency, welcome. Thank you for your time. First, I'd just like to say it's great to see you. How are you doing?
I'm doing a lot better than I was. I'm doing great. I'm probably not 100%, but I'm pretty close to it.
Well, you announced you were taking a medical leave of absence in December of 2019. You said you had physical and mental symptoms that were building that were long before you sought help. These symptoms were building. Take us back to that time and some of the pressures that were weighing on you and some of the symptoms you were experiencing.
Well, there were different things that were happening in the diocese, going all the way back to, let's say, the summer of 2018, not just the Diocese of Lincoln, but just the church. And over that year, 2018, 2019, I was trying to deal with them myself. I know I always used to tell people that apparent prayer that St. John the 23rd used to always say when he went to bed at night, Lord, it's your church, I'm going to bed. Well, I didn't apply that to myself, and so I would take all these worries and cares with me when I went to bed, and it started really with not sleeping, and the insomnia just kind of wore me down. And then I started developing this tinnitus or tinnitus in my ears, sort of a ringing in my ears. And that was in the fall of 2019. And, by the time the bishops' conference rolled around in November of 19, I just knew I needed to take some time off and get some help because I couldn't fix myself. I knew something was happening. And I could sense that not only was there this worry and anxiety, but also a depression. I was just, things that used to bring me joy just didn't bring me joy anymore. So I approached the Apostolic Nuncio and explained to him the situation. He was very good, very supportive. And he said, well, write this all down and send it to me and ask for some time off. And so I did, and I took the leave, and I went down to Phoenix, and my good friend, Bishop Tom Olmsted, who used to be my bishop in Wichita, who's a Lincoln priest, helped set me up at a retreat house, and I found a good psychotherapist, a good spiritual director, a good medical doctor, and lots of sun. And then after I took my medical leave of absence, the whole world took a medical leave of absence when COVID hit, which was kind of strange, and that didn't help my situation. But it is what it is.
Right. Well, how did that treatment, coupled with the leave of absence, really help in your recovery?
Well, I think it helped me to understand that I don't need to, first of all, fix everything myself just because I'm the bishop. And secondly, that I don't need to take all these things on personally, and it's kind of a pride thing, that it's, everything's up to me. And it's not true. And I think I was, kind of the American rugged individualism that thinks that, you can get, if you just work harder, you can get things done and get things fixed. And I needed to learn again how to surrender everything to God and to trust in God and to lean upon him and to let go of things and just to deepen in my trust in the Lord. And that's a combination of not just spiritual direction, but also therapy and getting a better balance in my life.
You've been very open in sharing your journey. What has the reaction been from your fellow bishops and from your flock?
Well, from my fellow bishops, I think I got about 60 letters after I left, commending me, supporting me, promising prayers. And then when I came back, now they're starting to roll in again. And I got to speak. I spoke at the very beginning of our bishops' conference just last week, and just to thank all the bishops for their prayers and their support. And then since I've been back in Lincoln, I've gotten a lot of letters and cards, people who've been praying for me over these months, people who have been worried about me, and I've been welcomed back very warmly, and that's been a huge support for me and a strength for me.
Bishop James Conley of the Diocese of Lincoln, it's great to talk to you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. God bless you.
In tonight's Faith and Politics series, Capitol Hill correspondent Eric Rosales sits down with the Catholic Congressman French Hill, who describes why he believes he was called to become a U.S. representative.
In my view, religious freedom is a tenet of American foreign policy.
On Religious Freedom Day in January 2019, Congressman French Hill sponsored a resolution calling on the Egyptian government to improve their treatment of Coptic Christians.
The Coptic Pope there says we all take our water from the Nile, meaning we're all Egyptians. But over the years, the legal structure has been very tough on the practicing of the Coptic faith.
It's a bill, he says, will, quote, provide support for Coptic Christians who are experiencing persecution, not only from terrorist groups such as ISIS, but also from their fellow Egyptians. And he's working to wipe out limitations on religious freedom of all kinds.
In 2018, Pope Francis, while addressing red martyrdom, those who face death and persecution on account of their religious beliefs, he also warned our nations about white martyrdom, which occurs in democratic countries when freedom of religion is restricted.
Like restrictions in some parts of the country right now on churches being open during the pandemic.
We want to make sure that if Home Depot is open, that our faith communities are open, and that we don't have infringement on people's First Amendment rights to practice their religions.
Congressman Hill credits his grandmother and his great aunt for encouraging his family's strong Catholic faith.
They really set the example in our life of a prayerful life and the enjoyment of the celebration of Mass.
A tradition his father, an only child, continued. And like his father, Congressman Hill volunteers as a lector at his home parish, the Cathedral of St. Andrew in Little Rock, and instills in his children the importance of serving the Lord. On Capitol Hill, he helps organize the National Prayer Breakfast each year. He sees it as a source of evangelism.
And also meet here with Catholic parliamentarians as well for prayer and conversation. So Capitol Hill, which is shocking to your viewers, it has a strong faith community.
A strong faith community working for the American people. Eric Rosales, EWTN News Nightly.
Finally tonight, with 32 days until Christmas, the White House Christmas tree arrives on a horse-drawn wagon. First Lady Melania Trump greeted the Christmas tree at the North Portico of the White House. It's a Fraser fir from Dan and Brian Trees in West Virginia. It's 18.5 feet tall and will go in the Blue Room of the White House. It was picked specifically to fit that room. We thank you for watching tonight. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Mark Irons. Good night, and God bless you.